I remember calling my parents like practically in tears, like, I don't know what to do, because school was expensive. We had to take out some sort of a crazy student loan because it was USC and I was out of state. And I was like, I've got this class tomorrow where I'm supposed to show up and listen to David Spear talk about scoring for television, but I also have this television show that's due tomorrow. And if I don't do that, I'm going to get fired. And my dad was like, why did you go to Los Angeles? Because I want to learn to be a composer. He said, sounds like you need to be a composer and not be a student if that's your option.
What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome back to another episode of the 52 Qs podcast, your weekly insight into the world of production, library, and sync music. Whether you're just curious about the industry, or maybe you're a grizzled vet with thousands of placements, I promise you, you're in the right place, and I just want to thank you for spending part of your day here with me today. Also, as always, a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers of 52 Qs who really do make all of this possible. We are 100% supported by you. And so if you want to learn more about how you can support 52 Qs while also unlocking a ton of subscriber perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds of hours of video archives, and the opportunity to submit to real music libraries, then be sure to tune in a little bit later in today's episode. Speaking of today's episode, we've got a fantastic one for you today, and I just want to jump right into it because I sit down and talk with one of my oldest and dearest friends, Mr. Jason Graves. Now, if you're not familiar with the name, I bet you've probably heard his music before. If you've played the new Tomb Raider reboot games, if you played Moss 1 or 2, Far Cry Primal, if you played Call of Duty Warzone, The Order 1886, if you've played the Dead Space trilogy, I promise you, you have heard Jason's music. And I sit down with Jason and we talk about, we reminisce a lot about college. We talk about his career path through film music, through making music for reality TV in Los Angeles, and transitioning into writing for games. So without further ado, here is my recent interview with Jason Graves. Jason Graves, what is happening, my friend? It is so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Now you've got me all out of breath because we were laughing so much.
That's how this goes. You know, we're just gonna jump right in. So happy that you've joined me, and understand you're kind of coming on the other side of being a little under the weather.
Yeah, right? I got hit by a 1-2 punch of like incredibly, insanely amazing concerts last week. I saw Hans Zimmer live on Tuesday, which was amazing. Man. And then I saw 21 Pilots live on Friday at the same venue. And between the two of those, and I think all the people and everything, it was, my body said, like, this isn't the studio. Yeah. This isn't like the antiseptic, perfect listening space that we're used to that has no germs whatsoever. We're going to go ahead and shut down on you for the next 4 days.
Like, you didn't go. You don't. They don't have HEPA filters, you know, in the venue.
We're like one of those. And
it wasn't
suits.
Jane's Addiction, right? Right. Oh my god. Yeah, with the little nose.
My concert still suit.
That's right. I'm drinking my pee right now. Sorry. And everybody's okay with it. This is how it's going to go, folks. Just buckle up, because I've known Jason, and I just realized this. I've known you longer than I've known Shannon, Mrs. 52 Qs, Shannon Croft, my wife. We celebrated our 30th anniversary this year, but I've known you longer. I think we met my first, it would have been band camp at App State. Because you were marching that in 92. Were you marching in 92?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
That was the only year I marched.
Yep, and that's when we met. We go way back, and every time we talk, even if it's months or years in between, it's always like picking back up. And I just want to say that I just not only dear friend, but also, if it's okay to say, I'm just like really proud of you. It's like seeing one of he made it, because if you know the name Jason Graves, then you know what Jason's done. But if maybe you don't know the name Jason Graves because you don't sit through the credits at the end of video games, if you have played Dead Space, if you've played Call of Duty Warzone, The Order 1886, Moss 1 or 2, Far Cry Primal, Until Dawn, if you've played the reboot of Tomb Raider, I promise you have heard the music of Jason Graves, arguably one of the nicest people I've ever met, and one of the nicest guys I know, who also makes some of the most terrifying music that I've ever heard. I mean, you even had like, didn't because you won a BAFTA, right, which is the British Academy Awards for Dead Space, and that was called the scariest soundtrack, like video game soundtrack of all time. Yay. So I just want to, thanks, I guess, right? But I mean, this is coming from, again, this super nice guy who lives like kind of out in the country, right? And I gotta ask, did you bring any of your zoo in with you? Are they in the
you mean currently
today?
right now? Someone's eating, but maybe we can see them a little bit later. Yeah, there's always someone in here with me, and there's always someone in the machine room, and we've got a lot of animals.
I gotta know, have animals always been a thing with you and Ellen?
Yes, because we've always had some sort of pets. I mean, starting with the usual dogs or cats, but I think we kind of got set off by a documentary we saw back in 2005 or something like that, and we started having chickens, like backyard chickens. We were in a downtown area in Raleigh, North Carolina at the time, and that just sort of blossomed into 1,000 other adventures. They're all different sizes, so they all have different lifespans and things, but animals are like my... I love spending time with my family. I love watching movies, but I also love animals, and they have no milestones or schedules or budgets or delivery dates or anything like that. And it's very, it's like a palate cleanser with the animals. They just want love, like unconditional love. And thank you for saying all those kind things, by the way. I mean, it means a lot coming from you, because we've known each other for so long and so many amazing memories. All right, here's one that just popped into my head. I'm not trying to change the subject, I promise. Do you remember when we would go to gigs with a steel band and everyone would like alternate taking turns singing like their own version of sitcom transitions? Do you remember that?
Dude, that memory was locked away freaking like Bing Bong style in some dark, deep pit of my mind. And I don't know what magical song you had to sing to extract that, which was going to be Deep Storage, but yes, I do.
Yeah, just
dun 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 dun.
Come in.
Oh, dude.
Yes.
I thought I had a still trap of a mind, but that is impressive.
Well, it's those things that pull from your memory when you start talking to somebody else. And obviously, we spent a lot of time together in college, but we also stayed in touch afterwards. But the music, I think this is where it happened with me. Music and animals are sort of symbiotic, where it's just very refreshing and never gets old for me. And the more I spend with one of them, the more endearing it is to me to spend time with the other one. That's a camera.
Okay, I just got to say, if you're listening to the audio podcast, then Jason's just talking. But if you're watching this, all right, is this a parakeet? Is this
a conure? It's just a small parrot.
Okay. So a parrot just showed up in frame. Because if there is anything that is like the Graves household in a nutshell, it's that right there. And so when we talked earlier, and what's his name?
This is Pickle.
Pickle. Watching Pickle just kind of walk around and sit on your shoulder, and it's just obvious that this isn't like just a eccentricity,
Oh, right.
this is the character of who you are. And so with that, I mean, it's no surprise that you have had the amazing success, the very real, like they don't hand out BAFTAs like to just anybody. This is that's top. That's it. And so I think I speak for everybody at Appalachian State circa 1992 to 1995, 96, that we knew that there was a there with you. And so it's not surprising. Nobody is surprised. Now, one of the things that was really, really interesting is how kind of our lives have always kind of intertwined a little bit. You know, we kind of ravel together and then kind of go our separate ways. And I remember when you left App State and you graduated and you went and got your graduate work you did at USC, the film program. But can we talk a little bit about the App State time? Because when I was there, and I started out as an education major because, you know, I wanted to be a band director, and then I saw everybody student teaching and I noped the heck out of that. And I wanted to be a film composer, and maybe I'm misremembering, but did you get the sense at the time, you know, this is like mid 90s, that film music was almost kind of like too commercial? And if it wasn't like art music, it seemed to be somehow less than. Am I misremembering it, or is that my own insecurities kind of projecting?
I think anyone in school is probably still going to feel that way to a certain extent, because it's more of a popular art than it is an artistic one, meaning that as the composer, your artistic dignity or your artistic integrity is semi-compromised because you're collaborating with other people. And I would argue that it's actually amplified and benefits from collaborating with other people, film, TV, games. But yes, especially back then, this was I was a junior, I think. So it was 95 when I saw my first internet page. Like UPS had an internet page where you couldn't really do anything. I think you could maybe track a package, maybe not. But the internet wasn't around, so you couldn't look stuff up. The information wasn't available and definitely wasn't as accessible as it is now. I had to go buy a book at the bookstore to find out what schools taught film music for a graduate program. You couldn't, there was no one you could talk to. You couldn't talk to anybody. No, I mean, my professor was just like, I don't know. Why would you want to do that? And I didn't know anybody in LA, and I could call the schools, but there was no way to find their phone numbers. It was, so I bought a book. It was like $60 or something just to find the schools that taught film music as well. So it was very intangible and hard to access, especially back then, besides just buying soundtracks and listening to them. That was really all there was.
Yeah, I think we both kind of had a love for soundtracks. I remember talking about soundtracks. You know, you would share with me like John Williams, and I would share with you like Danny Elfman. I'm like, music. I have very clear memories of listening to Music in a Darkened Theater, that
Volume
anthology
1,
from Danny Elfman. Yep. Did they ever make a Volume 2? Did they? But I have very fond memories of that. And then, you know, you're a couple of years older than me. I think you're 1 year older than me, because it's like Shannon, right. and then Jason, and then as far as long-standing people in my life, and then you went to USC, and let's talk about that and the transition from a pretty, standard state school. Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina, they weren't necessarily cranking out, media composers. They were cranking out band directors. Yeah. But talk a little bit about the transition into USC, about some of the real benefits and maybe some of the challenges you had coming out of such a garden variety state school, if that's okay to say.
No, I think it's okay to say. I think for us, because you were from Greensboro, is that right? Is that where?
Yeah, High Point. Yeah,
that's right.
Yep.
So you were in North Carolina. I was in North Carolina. And I chose ASU because of the School of Music, because it had an amazing School of Music. And we just happened to luck out in that the guy that taught music composition at ASU when we were first students was also the percussion instructor, which was what we both played. Yep. But he also was the Mid-East Ensemble instructor, and he was the steel band instructor, and he was the MIDI electronic music instructor. So essentially, we both became contemporary versions of him because we do, we do all, I mean, both of our studios, it's like we've got all that stuff, like...
Yeah, we're just cloning Dr. Scott Meister. I mean, that's all we're doing.
Exactly. So that was a huge benefit that I think we wouldn't have gotten I know we wouldn't have gotten at another school. However, he was also incredibly 20th century, and I'll never forget my first music composition lesson. I was so excited. I was taking a lesson in learning how to write music. I mean, it was just huge. And I showed up and he said, go buy the Persichetti book, pick a chapter and write a piano piece for me 3 minutes next week. And that was my first lesson.
See ya.
20th century harmony. And I'm looking through this. I'm like, none of this makes sense to me. I don't understand. And I found quartal and quintal harmony. And I'm like, okay, well, that's by fourths and fifths. I can sort of understand that. So I wrote a piano piece, spent like 10 hours or whatever on this 3-minute piano piece. And he sort of glanced at it and asked me 1 or 2 questions. And then I don't remember what it was after that, but there was a lot of abstract 20th century style stuff, which has come to help me and service my career in many ways that I think a lot of people don't have because of that. However, back to your question about USC, what I had no notion of was, well, anything else. I mean, I knew on this end, I knew 4-part writing, like 4-part chorale writing. And on this end, I knew like serialist minimalism and, atonal avant-garde 12-tone rose. And there was nothing in between, which is where media music is actually like dead center,
Yep. Let alone anything about like SMPTE codes or any of...
I mean, I knew MIDI because we had the MIDI lab, thank goodness. There was a Moog in there and an ARP and a TG-77. And you remember the TG-77?
Yeah, I remember the sound canvas?
Course. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a sound canvas for that reason. I have a TG-77 down here for that very reason. I just wanted one.
Dude.
Just because. The sound canvas, General MIDI, that's... it was a lot. They had an S50, right? You could sample into the keyboard and like play a recording of what you had just done
Yeah. And I remember we were there when Performer became Digital Performer. And that was, mind blowing.
4 mono voices, digital.
Hey guys, don't just slow your roll. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. That's a lot. I hope you can handle that much horsepower. I remember we had an assignment one time where we went to a bowling alley and we sampled a bunch of bowling sounds, and then we made our own synths and everything. And I got to tell you, that sense of experimentation and, like understanding that what he taught us has really imprinted on us and has reverberated through my career. I mean, I've got frame drums and Doombecks and Darbukas. I have frame drum that right there. The reason I even know what that is a direct result of my time at App State with Dr. Meister and also Dr. Falvo. And so, while they might not have prepared us for music and media and commercial music and understanding contracts and royalties and those kind of things, my hand drumming and world percussion. I mean, I've got shakers and things all over the place right now that are. Yeah, let's.
This is just right nearby. Whatever all of these little guys are, like. I mean.
Do you have one of these?
Oh, I do, just not with me. And I've got a little tiny Rick, and just like.
I will. I'll see your Rick and raise you one of these. Oh, you ready for it?
Oh, you got him out. Nice.
That was the best $15 I ever spent on Amazon.
Yeah, stuff like that. You just can't use samples. It just doesn't. It's not the same.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
USC, was that just like, oh, we're in LA? Did you like walk off? Because, you're married by this
Yeah, we
time, right?
literally got married on the 27th of July. We went on a honeymoon in Asheville for like 3 days. We came home, packed everything up, and drove across the country to LA because class started like
And you just,
August 17th or something like that.
and did you like, get out of your car and like, I'm here, Los Angeles, and somebody threw like an Orange
Yeah, pretty
Julius
much.
at you? I mean, is that how
Yeah,
it
it
went?
was like we were staying on campus housing, so it was just north of campus. But like walking to school the first day, I was walking with another student. He's like, "Oh yeah, here's where the riots were. Remember a couple years ago, like where there were people with machine guns back here, and this was over here." And it's just like it was a little
Oh, okay.
surreal. Plus, the very first class we went to, the guy that used to run the program, Buddy Baker, I flew out there and like auditioned or whatever, brought my compositions, my conductor scores and everything. And he accepted me. He's like, congratulations, you're the first person, this was in the following year, the first person in the whatever class it was of scoring for motion pictures and television, I guess it was called. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he had me already come to their first luncheon, he called it, or something like that. It'd be like if you and I started some sort of a class and we're just calling all of our friends to show up and talk, right? Except this was Buddy Baker. He's the guy that like wrote the Winnie the Pooh music and did the music for Haunted Mansion and like, I mean, he's
Wow.
like iconic. Fox and the Hound, all this stuff, as iconic as it gets. So his friends are like Jerry Goldsmith and Elmer Bernstein. I mean, and David Raxon, like all these people that have passed away now that were just still continuing to create so much incredible art at the time. So I had one class my first day, and then it was lunchtime, and it was lunch, and I didn't know who it was, and we walked around the corner, and Elmer Bernstein was sitting there. And I had lunch with Elmer Bernstein, and I just the whole time I was just like,
Do you know you're Elmer Bernstein? Do you know?
And then they had an SCL concert like 2 nights later or something, and Maurice Jarre was there, and Elmer Bernstein and Jerry Goldsmith, and like everybody was there. And at the end, Elmer Bernstein conducted the suite from Magnificent Seven with the USC orchestra, like right in the room, and we were at a dinner, and it was just, I think mentally I was like, yeah, I'm here, but it was sort of just kind of like trying to get my jaw up off the floor the whole time. And again, it doesn't matter, but back then we didn't have all these, I'm just going to put a blanket over it, more accessible tools. One guy in the class of 15 people had a sampler, and everyone was always blown away with how great his stuff sounded every time because he was using little samples of whatever kind of instrument. Everyone else was you just had synths, and you only had the synths that you could afford, and synths were expensive.
And they were heavy, and they were temperamental, and
it was like it was not only emotionally like seemed like an impossible mountain to scale, just from an emotional internal capability of could I even write music that sounds anything close to like Scherzo for Motorcycle and Orchestra from Last Crusade that John Williams did, to even if I could do something like that, I don't even have the means to physically recreate it. Unless I get an orchestra to play it, which is 10 times more expensive than just buying a synthesizer and trying to, or getting 2 people on a piano to do like 4-hand piano on it. It was an insurmountable, like physically impossible to achieve goal because you needed so much money and everybody was students. It just all, and a lot of it sounded the same because everyone could only afford the same synths. It's like you had a Korg M1, you had a Roland 1080, you had, those are the 2 most popular ones that I can remember at least. People were really blown away if you had a synth like that as opposed to something a lot less expensive. I haven't thought about that in a really long time, but it is crazy what we have accessible now versus 30 years ago.
I think that's why I have a career that I have in production and library music because, I can bring a 50-piece orchestra to a gig and it sounds pretty good. I mean, is it going to sound as good as live stream? No, absolutely not. But can it really, really get there? It's very, very close. And so then like all the synth VSTs, whether it's Omnisphere or all these other tools, just it's no wonder that there's a real explosion of people interested in being composers, producers, and the tools make it so much easier. And speaking of tools, my very first, don't mind us as we just continue to reminisce about old times. My very first computer that I ever got was your old
the
Mac
2SI, really?
That was my first composer. This is my first Mac, and because I remember you had upgraded to a Quadra, I think
300 or something like that. A Quadra 800.
Yep, and you're like, "Do you want?" And so you sold it to me. I remember it had an 80 megabyte hard drive. And it had 4 megabytes of RAM, 5 megabytes of RAM, one of which was soldered onto the motherboard.
Yes.
And it was all just in Finale. We were, we were using Composer's Mosaic
Market the Unicorn, yeah.
Yep. Where you would hit the note and just wait for the watch, and then the note would pop in. It was slow going.
I just looked it up. I got a Quadra 800. The price, the base Quadra 800, talk about like inaccessible tools, because I remember I had to get a credit card so I could get it, and I maxed out the credit card with the computer. It was $4,600, which is the equivalent to $10,000 today. $4,600 in 1994, 95.
That is insane, considering that I got a Mac Studio a couple of years ago, which is not only more, I mean, yes, it is incredibly powerful, and it set me back about $2,000. Yep. And so, but my very first Mac 2SI, and there I can draw a straight line from like that computer to that computer sitting on my desk right now. Now, as you during your time at USC, now obviously they are teaching you to be a film composer, but you're not Jason Graves, the film composer. You are Jason Graves, the game composer. And I feel like you were one of the first, especially, that I knew that went really, really hard into game music. So what was it about game music? And I know you did some work in production and library music, because I remember going to your studio in Raleigh and you were like working on some production, some library tracks, and they were all on like giant spindles of CDs and everything. But can you talk a little bit about your journey through film music, production music, and before finally landing in games?
Oof. Well, this is one of the things that I always reiterate to people when they ask about like, what's the one bit of advice that you could give? Because someone can only really do that kind of looking back on their own personal journey. And mine's kind of, as I think a lot of people's are, it's just sort of like this, where my camera's backwards. So this is where I thought I would be eventually. And I've just been doing this like the whole time. I've never really, it would go, whoa, and then go the opposite direction.
So like dune walking.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
what it is, right? You're like
pretty much.
If you haven't seen Dune, that would make no sense. But they do not walk in straight lines.
I went to school. It was for film and TV music, and I think before I went out there, my goal was I wanted to be a film composer. I wanted to do what Danny Elfman and James Horner and John Williams were doing, and I wanted to compose for live ensemble. More like interesting combinations of live ensembles, and lots of interesting percussion and stuff, being a percussionist. And when I was out there in school, I got recommended to go work for a former student who was in the middle of doing a lot of TV, a lot of reality TV. This was like in 95. So I actually got to the point where, I mean, it was like a dream come true, because I show up at this guy's house and he basically says, I've been working for 3 years since I got out of school, and I've been working on getting all these TV shows, but I don't want to do TV. I just got my first film, but I don't want to give up the TV that I have. Can you score for TV? Like, I called and Buddy recommended you. He said that, I knew more about MIDI than most of the people in the class, thanks to Doc and the MIDI lab.
Right.
That was a very low bar, though. I mean, a lot of them didn't even have a computer, let alone know. I literally remember explaining, I'm not joking, how the space bar is both play and stop, which seems completely innate to us now. But some of these people didn't even have computers. They just wrote with pen, pencil, and paper. Because that was the medium that was allowed at the time because of the technological limitations. So I said, of course. I said, yes, absolutely. And he's like, come back on Monday. I just need to call Sweetwater. I'm going to have your gear waiting for you. And I was like, okay. And I showed back on Monday, and it was this palette of gear, like Spec Electronics mixers and all these Roland S760 samplers and a couple of different keyboards and a couple of different rack mount synths. And this was on Monday, and he said, you have until Friday to set everything up. The producer's coming by to spot the first episode of whatever this TV show was, some reality TV show. On Friday, you have to score it by next Monday. If they give you the thumbs up, you're in. If they don't like it, you're fired. And why are you still standing here? Go put the studio together. And it was just, I mean...
Now, was this in LA?
It was in LA.
Yeah,
it was in LA. He was up in... just past the mountains, past the 405,
right.
Which is where I ended up getting an apartment because my long story being, it got to the point where he had so many TV shows for me to do. They liked what I did, thank goodness. So I kept working on more shows, and it was like, well, I remember calling my parents like practically in tears, like, I don't know what to do, because school was expensive. We had to take out some sort of a crazy student loan because it was USC and I was out of state. And I was like, I've got this class tomorrow where I'm supposed to show up and listen to David Spear talk about scoring for television. But I also have this television show that's due tomorrow. And if I don't do that, I'm going to get fired. And my dad was like, why did you go to Los Angeles? Because I want to learn to be a composer. He said, sounds like you need to be a composer and not be a student if that's your option. I was like, but all the money. He's like, money versus experience. You need to score the show, and he was right. So I ended up only showing up to the recording sessions at school for like the last half of the program, because I was so busy working. But man, talk about learning how technology works, learning how to interface with the producer, learning how to take like 3 different executive producers' notes on music, where one of them says, what's that high sound? That's a violin. I hate it. Turn it off. And the other one says, what's that high sound? That's a violin. I love it. Turn it up. And somehow mediating those comments and getting everything working with the technology. I mean, we're talking about tuning the tempo of drum beats with the pitch bend wheel to get it to loop properly because it's playing off of a sampler, right? You can't lock the tempo in the computer. The computer is literally just spitting out MIDI. And your 3/4 inch recorder tape deck is what's recording stereo music that's going through your mixer and everything. I mean, like getting the pitch bend and like moving the MIDI so that and sometimes it'll be a little hiccup and you can't help it. You can't record anything into the computer. There's a carrier standing outside looking at his watch because the dub is in 45 minutes and they just had 4 edits that rippled into the whole thing for this silly 22-minute, reality TV When Nature Fights Back, like documentary thing on the Discovery Channel. But that was my life for over a year. Working with this guy. And I learned a lot, but it also just killed me. I mean, I was waking up at 4 a.m. to go to the studio and working until like midnight and coming home and sleeping for 4 hours, like 7 days a week. But I learned so much from him, and I also learned from school, but school was more, the double basses play an octave below the cello, even though they're written exactly the same. I did not know that. Now, yeah, I could have bought the orchestration book and fallen asleep trying to read through it, but it's not like we had the accessible, hey, how to make your orchestra sound big kind of shortcuts and Cliff's Notes.
Yeah, there was no idiot's guide to film scoring back then.
No, it was all like do or die, and there was no way to test it out until you were on the stage. But we did do recording sessions with smaller ensembles, and every time we had a session, I would hang out afterwards and talk to the players. And I mean, I went around the room in case someone was like, gotta go, recording John Williams in 2 minutes, and they'd leave, because we always had great players. But I went around to every single one of them and would be like, okay, and I'd pull up my parts and I'd talk to them about the parts that I had, because we had to print out all of our own parts, right? We had to print out our scores, conduct them ourselves. Did I do a good job cueing you in here? Or was this too crowded? Or, what'd you think about the cue? And they were always kind, because they were being paid for a job, right? And I didn't have to pressure them too much after the first couple of recordings, but I was always like, I need you to give me 3 things that you could see going better. Like, what could I do to improve? Give me 3 things. And usually the first 1 or 2 would be sort of generic, but by the time you got to the third one, they're like, yeah, actually, you know what? Back here, that's a really awkward break for the clarinet, so you need to try to make, and I'm just like copious notes, keeping track of stuff. And I've always been, I mean, you already know this, but I'm like the triple A type personality and want to really zone in and focus on everything. And I love music so much, so I've always been obsessed with it and studying it. I really don't have any hobbies other than hanging out with my family and watching movies where I'm listening to the music and analyzing it and
trying to turn off your brain. Yeah, we are the same person,
off,
dude. Yeah, it never, to the point where, like, now that I'm getting placements in sports and have for like the last 10 years, I can't even watch football anymore because I'm clocking in at work. And so recreationally, I listen to jazz because even though, my master's is in jazz, I actually don't play a lot of jazz and I don't write a lot of jazz. And so when I'm listening to music, it's usually jazz or like audiobooks and that kind of thing, because it just never turns off. It just never, much to Shannon's chagrin. Of course, Shannon's a musician, and she is a music director and a pianist and a bass player,
and another wonderful human being.
Yeah, we both married out of our league, man. We both. I don't know why they said yes to us, but I guess. Okay, so let's fast forward. Dabbling, like I said, into production.
Didn't
and
even answer
music.
your question at all.
Hey, dude, this is the gig. I am here to help you, to Sherpa you up the mountain that is your life story. But kind of touched into production and library music. But what was it about games? And can we talk about that? How did that happen? Because it wasn't on many people's radars. Because what my understanding of game music, at the time was kind of and but talk a little bit about that transition.
Let's see. I think there was about 5 years of zip-zagging all over the screen, trying to do music or even audio in general, because I got completely burnt out in LA. I mentioned I was getting up at 4 a.m. I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. I started having nosebleeds and like getting stressed out about stuff. And then like all this stuff with like live musicians, and I was conducting and trying to run Pro Tools on this orchestra session, and it was a union session, and then I didn't have a union thing, and the guy was running after me after the gig, and everything was just like, I came home to Ellen and said, what would you say, this is my wife who married me and moved to LA a week and a half after we got married, if I said I wanted to basically quit here and move back to North Carolina? And she was like, I'll quit my job tomorrow. And we literally, she hated it. We had a great time as a couple out there, but being at the bottom of the totem pole and like not having a lot of money, being a student, trying to scratch some sort of an existence out there, it was tough. And I think within 48 hours, we had a moving truck packed up and we came home.
Wow.
After that, feeling like I'd failed and quit, which I had quit, but I spent 5 years just trying to make a living doing anything, which is where the library music comes into play and where the corporate music came into play. And I had to buy all my own equipment because all that other stuff was the other guys. So it was like investing again, trying to figure out what to do, learning alternate avenues of income, which I think is really, really important. And I know you agree, because I wasn't in LA anymore, so I wasn't going to be getting like that big break on a film score, but I did have some ends to indie film, which I did a couple of indie films here in North Carolina. At the time, Wilmington was a big hub for post-production until they stopped all their tax cuts and everybody went to Atlanta like 15 years ago.
Right.
But
what could go wrong?
They'll still come here. They're coming here because they love North Carolina. Sure they are.
Didn't they build a full-on studio in Wilmington? And it was done, but it never actually had anything done in it because the tax.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And,
that's government stuff.
Anyway.
But
yeah,
I mean, I did commercials. I did radio spots. I had a line of politicians standing outside my little tiny studio doing, my name's Jason and I endorse this ad. And I was dropping their voiceover in, but they were also using my music. And a lot of times they couldn't afford more than $100 for the music. I couldn't afford to make a track for $100, but I could take that digital performer session that I wrote that had a live acoustic guitar and me recording some percussion. I could open that back up and edit it to match your commercial so that it switches when the different points hit. That's where the library music started. And I ended up building, it was like 10 CDs, so maybe 700 minutes of like halfway decent stuff that was all edited with stingers and different lengths and beds and stuff like that. But probably, hundreds of minutes of music that I just ended up dumping to online catalogs. This was in the early 2000s, mid 2000s probably. Yeah. And then that catalog got bought by someone else, and that catalog eventually got bought by Disney, and it was non-exclusive. And then it went exclusive, meaning that no one else could use it. It was exclusively just for Disney, but I still get just ridiculously... They don't print them anymore, thank goodness, because I used to get these packages. It'd be like 250 pages of just all this silly stuff, reality TV and all this of them just royalty statements. Because the whole point of the library was the company that ended up selling it to Disney said, hey, look, you give us whatever it was, a flat fee per episode. You can use any track you want. So, and they made the flat fee and the royalties went, split, obviously, the way they are, 50-50, but I got 50% of the royalties. But it stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked. And then video game stuff got thrown in there as well. And I get more in my quarterly check for a royalty now than I did when I was first working on a salary music job, like back in 99 or something like that. Wow. And it just goes to pay taxes, basically. It's just like, okay, taxes. Yep. But all of that experience, that 5 years of doing anything from a bank commercial for Centura Bank, where it needs to be like, do, like kind of upbeat, fun acoustic pop, and bringing in a live guitar player to play the stuff that I couldn't figure out, to miking the politicians. They're there for 15 minutes. And if you forget to turn the mic on, or like my very first recording session, don't have the sample rates locked between the two digital things you have, one's at 48 and one's at 44.1, and this guy came in and recorded it, and I had to call him back. He had to re-record the whole thing because it was all Star Trek, like Klingon, like futzy, like cool space vocoder, except it was a children's video for like a toy, and it just was scary sounding. All of that built up, all that experience and interfacing with people, and I know you're the same way. I can look at a 3-paragraph waveform of someone who just said something, and they're like, now in the third sentence where he says, and I think, and I go, boom, and I think, they're like, how'd you do that? I'm like, yeah, I've done it.
You do this long enough, you know what sound looks like.
Yep, and you learn microphone technique. Even though I didn't record any instruments at the time, I learned about proximity effect and what the room sounds like, and recorded a couple of bands. I had no idea how to do it, but I'm like, sure, come on over. I've got 2 microphones. Let's just record them one at a time. Just trial by fire for pretty much my entire career. And I don't remember specifically where games like really pivoted until after I got my first one and I realized how cool it was. But I do remember specifically when I first found out about games. And that was when I was at our first house that we bought, and my oldest, who's now 22, was probably 1. So this was like 21 years ago. And this couple that Ellen and I just love from college called, they're Dave and Shannon are their names. They came and visited us for fun because that's what we did when we were younger. We visited each other in different states. And I remember you were like, have you heard this? It was Medal of Honor, right? Have you heard the soundtrack for Medal of Honor? And I was like, I'm not really that into games. I think I actually said, what is that? And he's like, it's a video game and Michael Giacchino. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really. And you played some of the cues for me in their live orchestra. And it sort of turned my head in a completely different direction because like you, I always thought, doop, 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 boom, 8-bit sounds. And I kind of calculated what I could possibly do, but it still seemed far away because games were somewhere, but they weren't in North Carolina. I just started going to conventions.
And like, you know, EA published Medal of Honor, and so and it was a disc-based game, so it was out on the PlayStation, which meant that they could fit a lot more than they could try to like cram onto a cart or something like that. And, you know, Michael Giacchino, that was one of his like first early gigs. And it wasn't the Michael Giacchino that went on to like do Star Wars movies and Star Trek and Pixar movies. I mean, this is a very, very new thing. And I remember being totally blown away because, and even right now, I can sing ba da 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 boom boom da 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 da. Like the fact that this theme, some 20-something years later, is still baked into my head. I was just like, oh, things are different now. Things are not going to be what they were on the other side of this. And you were the person. I was like, you need to hear this because this is like where it's going.
Well, hey,
and so
thanks.
Hey, man, you made me hip to library and production music. So turnabout.
That's kind of crazy,
play.
Isn't it? Like,
yeah,
that's.
Every week I talk about how this episode and the podcast and the community, the channel would not be possible without the amazing support of our family, friends, and neighbors, subscribers of 52Qs, who do pay their actual real-life money to keep all of this going. And in addition to being thriving members of the community, as well as supporting me and Shannon and everything that we're doing here, they also receive extra perks like live streams, workshops, Zoom feedback sessions, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video archives, weekly cue breakdowns, production music almanac, living ebook, and the opportunities to submit to real music libraries. Now, it's free to join 52Qs. You can just go to 52qs.com and sign up, be a member of the community. We would love to have you. It will always be free to join the community. But if you've been watching, or if maybe this is your first time, but if you're wondering, is there a way to kind of level up my production music skills in the industry, meeting like-minded, super friendly, very generous composers? Then why don't you think about subscribing? Memberships start at around $4 a month, and we would love to have you. Again, that's 52qs.com. Yeah, I mean, I have memories of going to your studio. You helped us duplicate our first CD for the band that Shannon and I were in. It was a Christian band called Job. Not Job, but Job. And so you were the only person I knew with a CD burner. And so we would go and hang out. As a matter of fact, it was during that time that you were working in production music. And that's why you had like the CD burners and everything. And we printed out the labels. And I'm sure they're still in a trunk somewhere, all those, because, you know, we didn't sell out all of our 300 CDs.
Oh, I've got one. I've got all my hardware-based music, CD and everything else are all in binders and stuff. I've got all that stuff. Yeah, that was good. I remember I've always loved bass guitar, but Shannon played bass, and I just thought that was so cool. Any females that do anything that normally, especially in the 80s and 90s, was like the guy thing. If you get them playing drums or playing bass, I'm always like, yes. I love that.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. 100%. All right, so games are a thing. You're like, oh, this is on my radar now. And from there, I feel like just looking back at your career, it was kind of boop, 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 boop. And then there was this huge, steep kind of incline where it was like, I felt like every year you were just crushing it, man. Game after game, I mean, big games like you did like a Star Trek game early on, and not to mention the Tomb Raider reboot, which you got to work with Crystal Dynamics. Dead Space, I think, was probably, is it fair to say that would be your like kind of your breakout game, the one that kind of like, oh, agents and things need to get involved.
I'm actually literally, I'm looking on my website right now to kind of see where I can't count. But yeah, it was, what's the saying? There's no such thing as an overnight success.
Right. Right.
And I'm not by any means diminishing your complimentary words, because it was on paper, especially if you look at my website or if you look at Wikipedia or something, or Internet Movie Database that has maybe half the games I've done, but it's got the years next to them. Sometimes there'll be 3 or 4 or even 5 games in a year. But it was a lot of stress, right? Like in between jobs, and it's always difficult. It's always incredibly rewarding, but it's never as easy as it looks from the outside. Mostly half because of the way I am and half because of the way any creative industry is. But I'm very much like, this has to be the best thing I've ever written. For Dora the Explorer, Voyage to Purple Mountain, or whatever it was called, right? But yeah, I think Dead Space, surprisingly to me, even now, I understand why, but at the time, I wasn't expecting anything to be made of it, because it was just another game that I was working on. And yes, I got to do some live orchestra. I mean, it was all sample-based. So I think since I was making the samples that I was using to write the music with, I felt like the music was even less authentic. And I was mixing it all. I was doing it all myself. I always have. Partially because, again, that's how I am, and also because I'm in North Carolina and not in Los Angeles. Just making sure my bird's not wandering under my feet. I heard the pitter-patter of little footsteps. He was freaked out by the headphones. That's why he didn't want to stay with me, because usually I don't have them on. Gotcha. But yeah, it was sort of like, okay, well, I did the best I could for Dead Space, and I killed myself on it for like 2.5 years, but I wasn't expecting all the accolades, and I definitely wasn't expecting, the last name to come back as some sort of synonymous with horror music in video games kind of thing, because before that I'd done like all these World War II Raiders of the Lost Arky sounding things, or a bunch of kids games, or a bunch of Star Trek games that were very Goldsmith and Horner-esque. I'd never done anything scary before, except for a cue that I wrote for Chris Young in school like 8 years earlier. So it was kind of a new thing. And then it just blew up, right? And it won a BAFTA. Yeah. We went to London for the first time. I took my wife. We went to Paris for the first time. I was visiting Ubisoft because I was working on many games with them at the time. And after it won the BAFTA, I was sort of like, now what? I'm 38 or something like that, and I got to record at Skywalker and do all like this awesome stuff, and I won a BAFTA for this game that I didn't even think the music would get any recognition whatsoever. It'd just kind of be white noise. Not that I wasn't proud of it. I was very proud of it, but I just figured the audience reaction would be like, yeah, just turn it down, please. That's just way too much. Yeah, so I think the long answer to your question is that's when I got a little bit of like name recognition, which is stuck. It's still, especially once I did Tomb Raider, they're like, okay, so Dead Space and Tomb Raider, and his last name's Graves, so when can we interview this really menacing, evil, scary guy?
Right. I know, right? That's like, Stephen King, and Rob Zombie. No, you're just... Super chill, nice guy, lives, basically amongst a zoo, with your wife and your kids. And so now for me, don't mind me just asking a bunch of questions that I've been wondering. I do not like scary movies. I'm not going to lie, Jason, I haven't listened to the whole soundtrack for any of the Dead Space games, let alone played it. Because now you're a super nice guy, super friendly, family man. How do you crawl into that headspace? Or is it just more sound design, kind of like borrowing all this aleatoric technique from your App State days?
It's purely, I think anybody, this is let me just meander verbally. This is one of the things that I love about music or any sort of art is it's sort of that kung fu thing where your greatest weakness can be your strength, or don't let other people like try to take advantage of what they see as a weakness. Like play it. Everything. So our background, and I can say us because we're both drummers and percussionists, and we did like all the vibes, and we did the conga technique and the triangle, and we sat in the back of the orchestra while Dr. Gora was conducting. Exactly. Right? Oh, you've got your Alan Abel triangle, and very nice,
dude. Here we go.
Yep.
This is my Abel triangle that I bought as a freshman. It stays right here.
It's like
I use it
an
all
$80 triangle. Anyway, like back then. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's still, I'll take this over any day.
I've got a bunch of triangles, but I always go to the Alan Abel, especially for recording. It's so nice. But see, we've done all that, and we've sat in the back of the orchestra and gone like, okay, well, now I'm going to play the triangle. Now I'm going to go over here and do the snare drum. And now, like, we've played all the things. We've played in the percussion ensemble where we're playing these weird instruments that we didn't even, like a siren or whatever, water phones and all these kind of outrageous things. So I think as drummers, but more importantly, as percussionists, we have a very separate kind of reality to what is musically possible with things. And I don't just mean banging on your steering wheel at the car in a red light. Having all of these just little things to use for sounds, now that it's accessible to us via technology. But even back then, when I started looking at like Penderecki and Ligeti scores, I still was coming from this sort of textural, instrumental, non-harmonic percussion standpoint. Because it just says like, play highest note as loud as you can for the first violins. And I'm like, that makes sense to me. I'll pick up my violin and go, it's very non-musical, but it's kind of reworked in a very musical way. So
yeah, I've just, don't mind me having an epiphany here. Like when we make a choice between a shaker or
how many shakers do you
or
own?
Maybe I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can see.
I've got literally a drawer full of shakers. Yeah, because everyone has a different sound and a different emotional.
Yeah,
yes,
and that is the principle of sound design. I never realized that. When I go from, do I want a kielbasa, or do I want an egg, or do I want a metal tube with shaker, or do I want a bottle of Tic Tacs? Right, that's sound design. Wow, you're right. You're totally right, man.
I think it's easier for us to approach it that way. The same way it's easier for us to approach rhythms and polyrhythms and like odd time signatures and things like that. It's been inherently ingrained in us as percussionists. So the kung fu thing I was talking about, though, up until Dead Space, all through school, like Paul White, super great guy, plays saxophone with us in college, or in post-grad, whatever, at USC, there was a guy that was an amazing piano player. He could sit, and he had perfect pitch. He could sit down and play anything, or just take like Happy Birthday and just start John Williamsing these Happy Birthday variations and stuff. And I was like, I could never do anything like that. I'm just a drummer. Like, I don't even... I felt like it was this super handicap that I was having to deal with. And as a result, I started buying, when I could afford it, the John Williams scores, studying orchestration outside of what I learned at USC. like really trying to get my hands around how to dial in those samples so that my 128 megabytes of RAM in the EMU sampler that I paid like $2,800 for, I can put my whole orchestra in there in 32 MIDI channels, where if you pulled it off the Miroslav V2 CD, the violin 1 was like 116 megabytes. And I had to learn to edit, with a little alpha wheel and clicking and all this meticulous stuff that I was really into because I was trying to achieve this goal of studying Princess Leia's theme and then writing my own piece based on those harmonies where I can get the samples to sound the way they kind of sound like on the Williams recording. Subconsciously, I was building up all of my weaknesses, which was true, but I never really leaned on my strengths as a drummer or percussionist until Dead Space, because there wasn't quite the opportunity to. And it wasn't any major epiphany other than they just said, write the scariest music that's ever been like written in the world. And to me, that was abstract.
Yeah, like there's Threnody, and then there's what you're going to do, because it's got to be scarier than Threnody.
But see, they didn't even know anything about the Hiroshima. They didn't know anything about Penderecki. The executive producer was pushing for heavy metal because he saw that as being, well, really industrial and working with the environment, and you have like a welding tool, and the audio director shielded me from this the entire time I was working, thankfully, because I think I would have fallen prey to like, I'll do whatever you want, just...
Yeah, that would take it into like either Red Faction territory or like even Doom. That was very kind of metal centric.
And that's like, I don't care how dark you get and how grindy the guitars are and like what like sort of crazy, super ultra diminished scale you're using. It's still going to feel empowering. You're going to be like, yeah, because there's going to have to be, even if it's in 7/16 plus 8/9, right? It's still going to have a cool groove, and it's going to have like a melody of some sort, and there's going to be like a dependable kind of rhythm that jumps around maybe, and you're going to have chords, right? You can't do like just mute it. It's going to have like octaves or fifths or something. And I wanted to throw all that out. And actually I saw The Shining on TV, which is it's just an incredible film, but Kubrick does such a great job with all of his music. He rarely uses an actual film composer. He uses pre-recorded tracks, and it was the all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, which was Penderecki again, with the little creepy pizzicato strings when Shelley Duvall's character starts seeing the pages that have all been meticulously hand-typed that someone spent like 3 months doing, and she's flipping through them, and I was like, that is terrifying. Like, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about the scene, because it's the combination of that stuff that Penderecki wrote back in the 50s and 60s with Kubrick in the, late 70s or early 80s? Early 80s was The Shining, maybe? Time. The combination of the two together were like magic. And for whatever reason, no one had done that in video games yet. So it wasn't like I was discovering some new pedagogical, like classical repertoire or something.
You were just applying it in a medium that had yet, the same way that Giacchino did with Medal of Honor. Nobody had really brought Hollywood kind of energy, because the technology was at the right time, the composer was at the right time, and the project was at the right time. And so I see the same kind of intersection in your career. The technology, the opportunity, and the right composer with the right background, the right understanding of everything that came before it, the fearlessness to try things and whether it's going to work or whether it's not going to work, and experimentation. And
I don't think I'm always stressed when I'm working on new projects, because I'm always trying to push and try something different, because I know that half of my satisfaction is learning something new. I just love learning new things, whether it's playing an instrument or a performance technique or learning how to record something else or meeting a new musician that introduces me to new instruments that I could never acquire. Learning is half the battle, I should say, for me. And
Nice
Thank you very much.
There,
so
go ahead.
I'm always kind of fearful because I'm trying to learn something new, and you're anxious because you're learning something new. But Dead Space was the first game where I really had no idea what I was doing, and I was sampling everything, which we won't get into. But I was building all my own contact instruments is what it came down to, and I didn't really know how to do that either. So it was just constant. I had 3 recording sessions with different orchestras recording different things. I had to figure out what they were going to play, how long they were going to play it, like how many different notes they were going to play, what instruments were going to play what for how long. I had to conduct it all. I had someone helping me, thank goodness, who did an amazing job helping me organize things. But then I had to take it all back and denoise it and cut it up and build it. And I mean, I've got, over the 3 games, ridiculous, like 300,000 individual samples of all these sounds, like just a ridiculous amount of sounds from the games. And that was all going to a gig where I'm playing drums and I'm in the back of the truck on my laptop, like orchestrating what I want the trombones to do for these clusters, and then at a conference where I'm giving a talk on some game that I did that came out the previous year, and literally going right back to the hotel room after that and like researching how to best denoise samples, because I've written 3 cues and I realize when I play a perfect fifth with another octave with my string harmonics, it's 3 times the noise, and there's all this room tone going, and I have to figure out how to get rid of it. Like
Isotope RX isn't a thing yet.
No, it was like a peak, like sound soap, something like that.
Now, did you make your own instruments and samples because the thing that you heard in your head didn't exist, or because of the yard you were given to play in with the project itself being so aleatoric and like really no rules here?
All of the above. The real problem, I place all the blame squarely on the audio director, because he told me, I say that in a very joking way, he explained what he wanted to do with this engine, which had never been done before in a game. I mean, I can say that statistically factual, because they had a custom scripted audio engine that had been used in the Godfather game that came out the year before, which ironically I was actually hired for until Bill Conti changed his mind and said yes. And they're like, "Thanks, Jason. You did a great job, but we got Bill Conti."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'll just be in the corner. Hi, Bill.
Yeah. Hey, if you're going to lose a gig, then
Bill Conti didn't use the audio engine because Bill Conti didn't really write a whole lot of the music. It was very, especially back then, it was very Hollywood, like, here's the music, and they went on their way. So we had 4 stereo streams of music that could be streamed off the disc in real time. 4. This was in 2006 when we first started. This had never been done before. And the audio director was like, I want to do this. Like, we did The Godfather and we only used 2. And that was for like, literally for music and for a stinger. Now we have 4 stereo streams and we have a RAM bus where we can play stingers. So we have all this capability. I want the music to basically never repeat. I want it to be completely interactive with the gameplay. And I don't want you to realize that there are like loops or anything like that going on. And I want it to be the scariest music in the world.
No big deal. No big deal. Yeah, you could do that, right? Yeah, it's like saying, yeah, sure, I can ride a horse. And then they say, okay, we've hired you to ride a horse. And you're like, damn, I got to learn how to ride a horse.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I came across the aleatoric orchestra thing. Don, the audio director, thought it was great. And he said, how do we do this with our engine, with the 4 stereo voices, and the stereo stinger bucket? And I said, well, I mean, there were no aleatoric libraries out there at the time for samples. There was nothing. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, we can't record 2 hours of music times 4. Like, we don't have the budget for 8 hours of live recording. That's like a 4 films budget. Like, we would need a month to record all of that. We have the budget for 3 days of recording. So the only way this is going to happen is if you give me all the money now, and I basically go and sample the orchestra doing all these crazy things. And then you give me like 6 months to put it all back together and start writing the cues based on the samples. And we would have to start like now because the game comes out, in 26 months or something like that. Because I knew he would never be able to approve that. He would never be able to say, sure, it wasn't even that much money. It was like $45,000 or something. And I split it up into 3 recording sessions because I didn't want to spend all my money and be like, wow, I really blew it. I should have done it completely differently. And now I have no money left.
Right.
And he's like, okay, great, let's just do that. And I was like, what?
Yeah, the dog caught the car, man. And now you got it. Now you're in it.
Enough rope to hang yourself would be exactly what he did to me. So then it was like, not only did I have to write music that I thought would work for the game, but I had to prove to him and more importantly to myself that I actually had some method to my madness. And there was a reason that all of this money that they were giving me was being properly invested. And I was terrified of being fired, replaced, the game. I mean, so many things over that 20 months.
Well, I mean, I would say it worked out because not only is it called the scariest game music, which I just, for full disclosure, I cannot personally verify because I've never played it. And no offense, Jason, I won't ever play that game. I'm such a chicken. But you went on to score more Dead Space. There was 2 more, or you did a total of 3. It won BAFTAs. It was the Dead Space 2 was nominated for a BAFTA. So I would say it worked out. It worked out.
Well, and also, thank you. But the all that pain and torture, whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And I've become I learned so much about conducting and preparing parts, but also what the orchestra sounds like when you're on the stage versus when you're sitting in the studio. And I've gone on to record my own samples, my own orchestra samples, as well as sampling my own stuff here, but also it turned me on to recording in general. And I got to know everybody at Skywalker so incredibly well. I could just text them and go, I want to record a cello. What's a good mic to buy? And Leslie Ann Jones would be like, well, I like this one, but it's really expensive. I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to buy it anyway. And just knowing people in the industry and getting that kind of experience, being paid to do all that I'm all sweaty now, just reliving it a little bit. But it really did. It made me more comfortable in my own skin as a drummer. Because if you listen to any of the action stuff, it's 7/8, 7/8, 2/4, 6/8, 7/8, 7/8, 2/4, 9/8, 7/8, 7/8, 2/4, 4/4, 7/8, 7/8, 7/8, 7/8. And then then a break of 3 bars with no rhythm, and then it jumps to something else. And I'm just drum transcribing. I'm figuring out those meters, and the strings are going ding 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 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 ding 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 ding. I mean, just like a drum set. I'm playing the toms, and then I'm doing a little hi-hat, and it's just a giant, really gnarly orchestral drum set. And you get so immune to it, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm just like, violins are a little loud.
Yeah. You don't, just like when I watch football, I'm not. It's oh, they scored a touchdown. I'm like, okay, what cue are they playing when they bumped a break? That kind of thing. Well, I don't think it's no surprise, man, that you have had all the success, and especially talking about coming up through app and the imprint that our mentors have had on us. And I want to talk briefly here for a moment, because now, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is going to be one of your, if not but one of the first times that you are offering yourself as a mentor and as a coach for folks who want to get into game music. Because I saw an ad. I was just chill. I was scrolling through Reddit, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I know that guy. I think is that Jason? Yes, that's Jason, and he has a course coming out on video. And this is not, I didn't orchestrate this whole interview just so we can plug your video game course, but Elevator, elevator.com, elvtr.com, is releasing one of your game courses. Can we talk a little bit about that and about maybe what students can look into? Because it's not just, buy my course and here's a bunch of videos and I hope it works out. I mean, it's like an interactive kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I completely forgot about that. I was trying to figure out what you were leading up to for the first 60 seconds. I'm like, oh yeah, right. I am doing that class. Well, I have a YouTube channel. And when I had more time on my hands, basically 3, 4, 5 years ago, I was updating it fairly constantly and posting things. Because I realized that the only thing I love more than learning new things is passing those things on to other people.
That's the doc coming through, man.
Here in town, my best friend that I went to Hans Zimmer with, here locally, he's my band director from high school. He's 10 years older than I am, but he acts like a 10-year-old child all the time. And he's basically the reason I ended up becoming a music major in the first place at college, because I was like, that guy's awesome. He's my band director. He's bringing in a keyboard and like showing me this new synth that he got, and he's playing like brass sounds and string sounds and drum set sounds on the keyboard. That's what I want to do, but I want to inspire like people a tenth of the way that he inspires me. So I started out as an education major, just like you, and quickly switched to composition because I realized education methods, learning the instruments, wind instruments, and my brain did not get along well. No. I can bow, strike, hit, or rub anything in the world, but if you ask me to start doing anything but a Native American flute, my brain like screams. So this, in a way, the YouTube channel and now this class is sort of my extension of like hoping to be some sort of a facilitator or educator. I tried with YouTube, but I just I was defeated by the time, the production time to post it. Yep. And I just ended up thankfully being too busy. But I never wanted to do a pre-recorded video series of classes, like, download my videos, because I like the idea of live feedback if I was going to actually be teaching some sort of a class. So out of the blue and without any expectation, Elevator contacted me and said that they wanted to do a course for video games. And I think they said something like, we're trying to find our rock star professor or something like that. And I'm like, oh, well, how many did you contact before you reached out to me? But they did say they saw my Jason. YouTube channel and they liked my enthusiasm. And I've always been very much like, there are no secrets, right? It's the carpenter, it's not the hammer, right? It's the artist, it's not the tool. Mm-hmm. And that's why on YouTube, I always thought it was important to share, like, here's exactly how I did this one thing. You might know a way to do it better because I'm still learning all this myself. And if you do, please tell me. So the class itself, the Elevator class, is a live Zoom call. 12 classes that are 90 minutes each, with an additional 30 minutes after each class of, I think they call it office hours. So it's basically like what we're doing now. Okay. I just hang out for 30 minutes and talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. But what I really like about the class, and the only reason I agreed to do it, is they let me do anything I wanted. And I thought, if I were going to see, like, let's say that I wanted to learn more about production music, and I saw that you were doing a class on production music, I thought, what would be the most like palatable and kind of sitting next to Dave in the studio experience that I would want to have if I were going to take a class with Dave? And what I would want is kind of a step-by-step chronological order of, so I got this assignment, or, a publisher called me and said that they were doing a new album of this sort of a style, and just go through the entire process of all the decisions that are made, how the music is produced, how it's mixed, whether you use live musicians or not, everything. And that's how the class is structured, from just having a good foundation and having your name out there and what it takes to get a job, all the way to landing the gig, producing the score, publishing your soundtrack at the end, doing interviews, the importance of a publicist, what an agent means, plus all that wonderful nitty gritty, like, let me open Dead Space, for example. Let me open the sessions from Dead Space and let's look at what I did and how I built the samples, or a whole class on writing melodies and themes, stuff on textures, stuff on anything from Call of Duty to Moss, which is this like fairy tale land soundtrack that's the opposite of Call of Duty or Dead Space. I'm excited, which is why I keep talking about it. But I'm literally still planning it. It's like real world. The speakers that are going to be talking are people that I work with normally. The assignments are jobs that I've had in the past. And the final class is also all based on stuff that I've done, and I'm giving a version. I think there's only 4 assignments, but there's 3 different genres within each assignment. So it's not like, okay, let's write a horror cue that sounds just like Dead Space.
Right.
It's literally, okay, we've got, a scary game, like a fantasy game, and some kind of a military thing. And you pick which one of these you think is your strongest or weakest genre, and let's explore that.
Yeah. Well, I think, the internet is full of plenty of influencers and people who would want to get you to, to buy their courses and everything. But that's not at all what's happening here. And so I knew that when I saw you coming out with a course, that first of all, it was going to be something unique. It's going to be something that people are really, really going to love, and that it was going to be infused with the DNA of just who you are as a person, your generosity, your kindness, your you're like an open book, And so I think this is really exciting, and I'm excited for you. Of course, if you're watching or listening to this, we're going to have a link to this. It's at, just so you know, it's at elevator.com/course/music-composition-4-games. Okay. Or you can just click the link in the description. It is 6 weeks, and it starts kind of relatively soon, October 8th through November 14th of 2024. And it meets Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, for 6 weeks. And so now, do you think if this goes well, do you think this is something you're going to keep doing or want to do? Or are you waiting to see kind of like on the other side, or depending on what game, if Crystal Dynamics knocks on your door again?
It's always a bit of a challenge playing the prediction game when it comes to schedules and things. I've found the easiest way that I can guarantee I'll be busy is to plan on not being busy and make plans accordingly. There was already a tremendous response from the limited bit of advertising that Elevator did for this class. I think games are sort of cutting edge at the moment. So we're talking about scheduling some future classes, starting as early as December, depending on my availability, of course. But, it's like, I don't like, if you know how I am. If I'm going to commit to do something, it's going to be on the books, and then I need to work everything else around there. So it is nice because games are normally marathons and not sprints. And these are essentially little 6-week sprints, because each course is only 12 classes for 6 weeks. So I'm hoping that I can lay down a foundation for those classes. And the whole reason I picked multiple genres, as well as like there's no specific speaker or anything like that, was so if we do, by we I mean me, end up repeating it, I can keep things fresh for myself. I'm not just reading the card like my senior high school science teacher for chemistry, like, turn to page 52. All chromosomes are... Oh my
God. I had a music history teacher who was a brilliant man, but he was, back in 2008, he would have been probably maybe like late 60s. He had this old dusty notebook with yellowed paper, and it was 3-hole punched, and he had put multiple rings on the holes to keep, and he would just lecture and just slowly turn the page. But, oh my gosh. And I totally understand, teaching at Full Sail, I teach the same curriculum month after month after month, and to keep it fresh, I've got to mix things up, and I've got to and what I do on that class is I infuse my own experience, and the syllabus is essentially like how Dave, approaches production and library music, and kind of extrapolate that into a larger application. But this elevator thing, man, I think it's going to be something super special. And if you're watching or listening and you have any interest in this, and you literally want to learn from one of the best in the business, because again, I know you giggle, dude, but and I know you're just Jason, I'm just Dave, but looking on the outside, man, this is really cool, and it's a very special thing, because you're not just an internet influencer looking to hawk a course, and so I'm just, again, I'm proud of you.
Thanks.
And it's really cool. You're welcome. And so starting on October 8th, and I would be remiss, if I didn't mention that not only are you helping out folks over at Elevator, you're also helping out the folks here at 52Qs, because on September 30th, which is when this airs, this will be the following Monday, you are going to be giving us some of your time over at 52Qs for the family and friends subscribers, and you're going to be doing a Q&A and Q review session. Now, really excited. I'll go ahead and tell you, man, we've already got folks who have submitted cues, and we're only going for about an hour and a half. We're going to go first come, first serve, as many as we can get through. So if you're interested,
we'll be able to get through two, I think, in an hour and a half.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry.
So let me see. Can we hear that again, Dave? I think I'm going to, but
if you're interested,
you can submit your cues. Yes. If you are interested, then head over to 52qs.com. Again, it's open for our family and friends subscribers. And we do these Q reviews pretty regularly, whether it's an editor from LA, or whether it's fellow composer or a library owner, or what we have this week, this month, something really special. One of the best in the business, giving us a generous helping of his time. And so that is September 30th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Jason, man, we've already gone almost an hour and a half here. I could literally talk to you all day. But congratulations on all your success.
Same to you.
I know that thank you. I know that everyone who knows you it's obvious. Yeah, of course, this was going to happen. And I know that you are a jewel in the crown of Appalachian State. And I know, I don't know if Doc will ever see this or listen to this, but for us both being kind of, how do I want to say this? It's like, when you study with somebody, you are woven into a lineage, And so just as you are woven into Jerry Goldsmith's lineage and Elmer Bernstein's lineage because of your experience in USC, we are both woven into the lineage of Dr. Scott Meister and Rob Falvo and everybody that came before them. And so I am proud. I'm proud to be a part of that with you, and just congratulations on everything, man. Congratulations on just being good people.
Right back at you. I'm going to need to take a break, because I have been a little bit sick, but I haven't laughed or smiled as much as I have in the last 2 hours, probably in the last 2 years. But that just goes to show, that's just a snippet of us hanging out all the time throughout college and beyond.
Yep.
When good people, the right generosity and be kind sort of philosophy and positivity that you and Shannon both just have always radiated, which I think is why Ellen and I were always having so much fun and so drawn to hanging out with you guys. That is eternally regenerated, So I appreciate you saying it, but I know that all of your students and future students feel the same way, because I showed 3-second clip of something just because Ellen wanted to see your glasses. I pulled up your YouTube channel real quick, and she immediately goes, "Oh,
Yeah.
Dave's got such a great voice. He does such a good job talking." I was like, "I know, right? Like you're just, it's natural though. It's not a thing. I mean, it's a little bit of a thing because you have to speak clearly, but it's just really cool. And I love that you found fulfillment in like helping other people and doing what you love at the same time. And I love, it's funny because I should have called you as soon as the elevator people talked to me because you've been doing this for so long. But where you're like, I do this every month and I have to change it up. And it's just like, of course you do. Of course you're using your own stuff. Of course, like that totally makes sense. But just like you, with my kind of mentality of percussion and textures and orchestra, 20th century stuff, Penderecki, I never thought about that from a teaching standpoint because I've never been in that position before. So all the hard work, blood, sweat, and tears I've been mentally doing for like the last, what is this, September now? May is when they approached me. Can I do this? If I'm going to do it, how would I want it to be? You're naturally doing the same thing. I bet you could probably put our classes parallel, and it would be very, very similar.
Looking over your syllabus, absolutely,
Awesome.
It's uncanny, and I don't know. I just feel like there is a quantum entanglement. You know what I mean? That doesn't know time or space. We were texting back and forth, and we were texting each other, and then we realized when I saw your elevator thing, I was like, Jason, this is cool. What are you doing? And it had been like a couple of years, which is no problem. Yeah. And you're just like, oh my gosh, hey. And then we just pick right back up. And I want to encourage you, listener or viewer, that first of all, authenticity is the highest form of currency that you can have in a creative industry.
Can I quote you on that? That's
good. Yeah. No, it really is, because if you're fake or fronting or whatever, people are eventually going to see through it. Or if they don't see through it and they know what you're doing, then they're going to take advantage of you. But if you could just be your authentic self, lead with positivity, lead with generosity and kindness, then the universe will reflect all of that back on you. It's why I say at the end of every single episode that the universe has amazing plans for you, because I live that. I am living proof of that. The fact that I'm having a 2-hour conversation with one of my best friends on the planet, even though we haven't talked much in the last couple of years, is because we are quantum entangled on the friendship level. And so yeah, I just want to encourage you, if you're watching this, that you're doing the right thing. If you've made it this far into the interview,
God bless you.
God bless you, listening to a bunch of college buddies just reminisce. But and I think that it's imprinting. How do I say it? We are products of those who imprinted on us. And we are now the generation imprinting on people, imprinting on those who are going to follow us. And if we keep that cycle happening, then it's a rising tide raises all boats. And so we're just going to continue to be a positive force in the entertainment industry, which needs it, which can really grind you down. I mean, you're you moved. You said 48 hours. You had decided to leave LA, and you're like, peace out.
Yeah,
I'm out. Yep. So Jason, again, congratulations on all your success. I look forward to seeing you here soon for the Q&A and Q review. And of course, it goes without saying, if there's anything I can do to help with the course, please don't hesitate to let me know. But if you want to get in touch with Jason, he's at jasongraves.com. We'll have the links to elevator.com. Do you want to give us a shout for any of your Insta, or do you do a TikTok or any of that?
I know I post on Instagram like pictures, and that's about it. But they're usually fun pictures that I find, and that's just Jason Graves Music. And then I do I'm sorry, I just have to call it Twitter. I do the Twitter thing. I'm there a lot.
I call it Twitter.
And there's a lot of incredibly kind, like-minded, like supportive composers on Twitter that I really, really appreciate just communing with in general. either over silly pictures or just like, hey guys, do you know someone who plays double bass and can record themselves at home? I asked that last fall for a game I was working on, and I found 5 incredible musicians all over the world that record themselves at home on double bass. That's just JG Music. So yeah, come say hey and be kind with all of us.
Yep. Lead with generosity. Jason, you certainly led with generosity today by giving me so much of your very valuable time. Thank you so much. And we'll be in touch soon.
Talk to you soon.
Once again, a huge word of thanks to Jason for joining me today on the podcast. And like I said, we're going to have links to all of his business in the description below, so be sure to check those out. And I'm telling you, if you are interested in writing music for games, you've got to check out his course. This is unprecedented levels of access. Zoom sessions, 6 weeks of Zoom sessions with somebody who is at the top of their game. Where can I sign up? But we'll have those links in the description below. And so thank you for joining us. I'm so glad you found the podcast, however you found the podcast. And if you enjoyed it, then why don't you consider paying it forward? Maybe give it a thumbs up, maybe share it with somebody. Or if you're listening to the audio on the go, then maybe think about a 5-star review in your podcast app. Whatever you can do will help other folks find us. But that is going to do it for us this week. You want to tune in next week because I'm going to be talking about the musical components that define mood and emotion. Because there are some different levers that we can pull as composers to help communicate different moods and emotions. Now, some of them are obvious, like what is happy, what is sad, but what if I were to say, what musical components communicate something like surreal or sarcastic? Or what's the difference between positive, inspirational, uplifting, and happy? Aren't those all synonyms? Well, in the world of metadata, production, and library music, and mood and emotion, those are all different shades that all have different musical components that shift. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week, the musical elements that define mood and emotion. So you definitely want to tune in for that. But again, thanks for joining us. Hope you've had an amazing week, and I am filled with confidence that next week is going to be even more amazing. How do I know that, friends? Because I know, trust, and believe that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52 Cues podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52 Cues, head over to 52cues.com.